Welcome to Museum Rat. I am your host, Doug Y., coming to you from the Pasadena Media Studios and broadcasting on Arroyo channel. It is fitting in this two-part finale of our first season that we look at the show that started this show, the Warhol exhibit From A to B and Back Again, the ironically surface title of both the Whitney retrospective of Andy Warhol, the first and largest retrospective of Warhol since his death over 30 years ago. And it is this show I was absolutely determined not to miss that sparked Museum Rat when I came back and was here at Pasadena Media. The wonderful, talented Jared Hodgson looked at the notebook that I brought back with me and said, this is a show. Can you go to museums and review museum shows? And I said, that sounds like an absolute dream. I would love to do that. And out of that came this show, which I absolutely adore doing. So this is going to be our first two-part episode because there are over 350 pieces in the Warhol exhibit. So we simply can't do one episode on it. We're going to do two. The first one is going to look at his earlier work, and the second is going to look at his later work. And we should go ahead and get started. So Andy Warhol was born Andrew Warhola in 1928 in Pittsburgh to Czech Byzantine Catholic parents. He is inundated with the power of symbol and ritual, icon and habit. He is fascinated with being accepted and yet always feeling the outsider. The idea of the difference between private and public meaning of things. Copy, replication, the industrial mass-produced world after World War II. It is an endless rabbit hole when you start to go down Warhol's work, and so we're about to go down it right now. First, we have Dance Diagram. This is from 1962. Much of his most famous work broke right about this time. The soup cans, the Coke bottles, the green stamps, all of these things came out in roughly 1962, 1963. Of course, he has very famous pieces from other points in his life and in his career. But think about this. The idea of a dance diagram, the repression of modern society, that people need a diagram to dance. There is nothing more natural than playing a rhythm. Every child will start to move, will start to bounce to the beat of that rhythm. But in the modern society, we are filled with systems of control and defined gender roles. And that is part of why he begins to do these dance diagrams. He did several of them. Followed by the famous Brillo boxes. These are wood boxes that he ordered from a cabinet maker in custom sizes. He would have them delivered to his studio, and then they would be screen printed. So he begins to see the world, and then his art begins to make the viewer aware of the industrialized assembly line of corporate products that the world becomes after World War II. Right? You have an enormous apparatus where all of these things, canned food, Brillo boxes, all of these types of being able to ship industrial products are coming from an industrialized war effort that now turns its innovations to the world, you know. And after World War II, humanity lives more like soldiers. You begin to see this in many other aspects of his work. The exploration of post-war America, signs and symbols, a curiosity with the Allied New World Order, maybe an ambivalence to it, an exchange with the world, you're giving people access to aspirational and staple products in exchange for positioning money at the center of human life. And he does it quite well, showing all of these different things. You know, when he does cans of soup, think about soup. Is there a more potent document? Think about soup as a document. Is there more information available than a bowl of grandmother's soup? Cultural context, socioeconomics, the environment around where those things were being prepared. Now, these are all condensed soups. Campbell's going out into the world, discovering all of these cultures, breaking it down into far fewer ingredients that can be mixed and matched to produce this number of types of soup. And they're not being made by grandmas. This is the condensation of global culture into a can. And that is an industrial process. And so why soup cans? Well, I think soup is a really potent symbol for culture, individual cultures in the world. And when he portrays these things, you see literally the condensation, the condensing of cultures from all over the world into a can. And of course, canned food, canned soup, was created and invented originally for soldiers to be able, so that it wouldn't spoil and they would be able to eat on the front lines and not be getting sick from rancid food. You know, it is interesting as he paints, creates dole packaging and all sorts of other things. You know, where does fruit come from? In this age that he's depicting, comes from a can, not a tree. And I think that he continues to be very aware of a corporate industrialization of the world, the receding of the natural world in human life, the pressure to conform to industrialized soldier's life. Green stamps, the idea of a book of green stamps, and the juxtaposition between green stamps, being able to take these down to the store and using a book of green stamps to be able to purchase things, and money, being able to take a collection of these dollar bills and using it, but it is still representational wealth. And his color work, not only is his color work amazing because of the juxtaposition, the vibrancy of his color, but the fact that he can find that vibrancy out in the world, and especially the world of advertising. You know, he's fascinated by what elicits the consumerist response from people. And he obviously becomes very, very successful at that. Coca-Cola bottles, similar. You know, one of the things he said is no amount of money can get you a better or worse Coke, that it is an egalitarian drink. Then, you know, he can be, I think that Warhol gets painted with a brush, pun intended, that he was nihilistic or apolitical. I don't find that to be the case. I find that to be an intense misreading of his work. Here you have depictions that he did with CBS and New York Times for something called The Nation's Nightmare, which was a show depicting heroin use in the United States. And unfortunately, not much has changed. Hard, difficult pictures. And we're going to keep coming back to this idea of the contact sheet and how much you can change a persona, refine a persona by the end of a contact sheet. And he is continually fascinated with that process. A simple depiction of his address on one of his early cards. And we get into his decorative work. Now, he was working as a ad illustrator, enjoyed it, mostly shoes, but the idea here is, look at the gold, the shape, the line. Now he's adding color. All of his early illustrations, his signature was actually done by his mother, Julia, who was an artist in her own right. She has one piece in the show that we will be taking a look at. But watch the refinement. Some of his shoe illustrations. This is Julia's picture, their cat. A cover for a cookbook that Warhol did early in his career. And now he's taking the idea of gold leaf. He's using the idea of advertising illustration, and now he is moving it into a different space. This is a depiction of James Dean, obviously a commodity in and of himself. He's not Jim Dean, he's not Jimmy Dean, he's James Dean, and the hair and the jacket and the collar and the whole thing is an image that is being sold to the American people. And again, gold leaf behind it, right? The allure of the color, the allure of the gold. I love this picture. This is actually one of my favorites from the whole thing. Reminds me so much of Van Gogh's My Room. And watch how different his techniques can be. You have a simple but fairly realist depiction of his living room. And then look how raw these are. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about these portraits is he is always so interested in the sale and the selling and the allure and the attraction and the desire, in the seduction of the consumerist impulse. And then he will flip it and be completely fascinated by the opposite impulse. He's looking at things that are rough, that are ugly, that are vulnerable. He's fascinated by human, organic processes. This person on the toilet, someone picking their nose, breastfeeding an animal, right? Things that are repulsive. There's a tension between attraction and repulsion that he is constantly curious with. The vomit here. And how simple when he is getting things down from his mind without consideration of selling, how differently he draws. This is a illustration of Otto Fenn, the fashion photographer. He did a number of illustrations and photographs of Otto Fenn, and Otto Fenn would come and photograph his work in the studio, would come and photograph Warhol's work in the studio. This is of Capote, Truman Capote. And this is called Feet, obviously a highly erotic image. Feet and money, feet with dollar bills. Think about body abstraction, right? If we go all the way back to Stiglitz and Georgia O'Keeffe and the abstraction of Georgia O'Keeffe's body in the photographs, we are seeing a different type of abstract expressionism now, where he's using iconography, very, very powerful American iconography like these dollar bills. Feet with candlesticks. Male genitalia. These are all being produced in the mid to late 50s. They're scandalous images, for sure. These are interesting. The first one, the first photograph is his passport photo. The second photograph is his passport photo wearing a fake nose. And then the bottom two cards are both for exhibits gallery exhibits. They're announcements. The first one is for his pictures, 16 pictures based on Truman Capote's writing. And the second is the Golden Slipper Show, which we will take a look at. So he did a series of golden slippers. It's gold leaf and ink illustration. Sometimes there's something else little in there. And he considered all of these portraits. They're pictures of individual people, Elvis, all of these types of characters. He would find a shoe that he felt would depict the person individually. This image, highly erotic, stands out across the entire gallery at the Whitney because of the contrast in color and the very, very strong composition. Look at how the pink and the gold interact. Look at how much energy there is. And then, of course, your eye is drawn into the abstraction of the body of the character. And one of the things that he continues to find, these are from his Capote show, are ways to take abstraction so minimal. Look how little is there. One eye, just like Giacometti. In Truman's hand. He finds ways to do abstraction, right? This is the hairline, eyebrow, and eye. But the way the composition is working, it has very erotic, it elicits a very erotic response. It appears to be genitalia, and then at a closer look, you realize it's an eye and hairline. And think about the soup cans again, you know. Again, abstraction of the body. Aren't the soup cans an abstract expression? And is abstraction, by definition, a commodification? When we take something that we feel that is impossible to depict, and then we depict it, whether it is considered non-representational, not something identifiable, or not, totally abstract, is that not a commodification of the unspeakable, the undefinable? Is that not also a commodification of human emotion? And I think that's something that he was very curious about. Another picture of James Dean. Beautiful work. This picture is referenced over and over again in modern advertising. And then he goes into Coca-Cola. So this is Coca-Cola 2 from 1961, Coca-Cola 3 from 1962, closed cover before striking, a depiction of a matchbook, also selling Coca-Cola. And then he begins to draw newspapers. And I wonder if a picture of a newspaper isn't a different way to create an incredibly complex composition. The amount of information that the text can convey and the juxtaposition of image and text in a newspaper, and by selecting a specific newspaper for specific reasons, cropping it, right? We're always abstracting. We're abstracting these moments from life. But instead of a battle scene requiring hundreds and hundreds of characters and, you know, an entire Renaissance studio of artists working towards the final goal, Warhol is always interested in what is the fastest, most mechanical, least human process. And he does a lot of depiction of individual journals. This is an interesting piece. So he does Superman. Now, aside from the questions of masculinity, the wry, queer readings of Superman, of Man of Steel, all those different things. Part of what I love about Warhol's art is that every piece that the viewer looks at is not simply the image and the viewer. Many artists let the work stand alone and the viewer be alone with the image. But Warhol is always the filter in between the two. When we look at this picture, we look at it through Andy Warhol, and that is something that we constantly have to deal with. Is his persona stands in front of everything as we consider it. These were done, by the way, for a window dressing. Yeah, there you can see it, a window dressing. Now this is another interesting thing. You see the rhinoplasty piece. Warhol did get rhinoplasty. He shaved his nose. He changed his name. No longer Andrew Warhola, but Andy Warhol. Now, one of the most difficult questions that I find in Warhol's work is, would Andrew Warhola, with the more bulbous nose and without the wig, been as famous, been as successful, been as potent a symbol? It is something that I believe Warhol would say no, that the creation of the Warhol persona was every bit as vital as the art itself. Dick Tracy, another wry kind of take on proto-masculinity. One of the things, and I asked the docent, I was there for 2 days, a full day, and then I came back for a second day and took a tour with the docent. They didn't have the answer for me, and I still don't know. But he finishes the image, and then look at all these crayon marks that he scratches up on top of. And again, that tension between perfect and repugnant, attractive and repugnant, the desire to take something perfect and mar it in some way, comes up again in his collaborations with Basquiat, which we will be looking at in the second episode of the Warhol exhibit. 29 Diana Jet, this is the first of his Death and Disaster series. He is studying printing now, but it is hand painted, and you can even see the Ben-Day pattern, the dot pattern that Lichtenstein is so famous for, in the corner with the Statue of Liberty. So he's really mimicking the printing process, but this is hand painted. You have Roll of Bills from 1962. Campbell's soup can with ketchup bottle. Campbell's soup can over Coke bottle. And again, there is an echo chamber created by taking these industrial packages, delivery systems, and putting them on top of one another. You could spend years unpacking this image, and the potency of those sorts of things was really brought to the attention of the world, certainly by the pop artists, but most famously by Warhol. And you can see the photographic studies that he would take. And this was something that Warhol did a lot. He used projectors, printers, photos. There was nothing off limits. It was not about showing his virtuosity as a technical artist. It was about speed and replication. One of the things that he said was, make as much art as you can, and while they're talking about and discussing what you've just made, make something else. That you are not, as an artist, to be part of the conversation of what it meant, what you made. but instead make more, make it faster. Always be ahead of your audience in terms of what you're creating. The reference photos that he took. And the invoice for his photographs, $100. Pirate sees ship with 900,000. The idea of exaggeration. It was they seized. This was a true story. They seized a ship with 900. He added the other 3 zeros when this came out. It's been cropped, and then he enlarges it. He does this several times. Again, he'll do it with Mao, the portrait of Mao, and abstraction of copy, abstraction of the story into its elemental pieces. And I think that part of this is the questioning of authority, the questioning of the truth that is being presented, not just in newspapers, but religion and so many other things. This is Elizabeth Taylor diptych. The silver screen. And Brando, the reduction of an individual into an icon, right? The commodification of the icon into a mass-produced product.